So far, technology is being gracious with us, so that's always a plus. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come in today and participate. We are actually streaming also on YouTube through the channel called One King's Mission. Let's see something here. And all right, so what we're going to do today, basically, we're just really having a discussion on mental health and street organizations. And the way that we came across this topic is because we really wanted to understand what was transpiring with respects to gang violence and street organizations. What is the difference between the two? How they're connected, how they're separated, and what is going on. Wait, I've got a message here. Alyssa, you're not getting any sound. You can't hear us, right? All right, so let's see here. The joys of technology, right? We're going to blame our licensed clinical social worker for any technical issues that we're having today. Are you hearing us now or no? Let's see. You got it? Is the sound coming through? All right. So like I was saying, so what we really want to address is uh, one of the taboo topics within street organizations and gangs. One of the things that people don't talk about is the mental health aspect, right? It's very easy to talk about the violence. It's very easy to look at a city like Chicago, where 47 people were shot this past weekend, where every weekend the number of shootings is in the double digits. You look at New York City, that has seen an increase in gun violence in the last year. It's very easy to address the violent aspect, the narcotic aspect, the assault aspect, but nobody ever wants to address the mental health aspect of things. And as a result of that, we're losing sight of the root of many of these issues. I've witnessed firsthand organizations that have had leaders that exhibit textbook criteria, textbook definitions of narcissism, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, depression, and the negative effects of their mental health or lack thereof, and how it transcends into the membership. Someone who is really believing that the enemy, if you will, is crawling through the window to attack them is going to make a phone call to the 50, 60, 70 individuals that they quote unquote are in charge of and put out an order saying, hey, I'm being attacked, so we need to go to war. And nobody really thinks about that. The depression aspect, how people are being fed in these small groups that are going unchecked. So we're lucky enough today to have a career social worker. Danielle has been in the field, I would say, for the better part of 2 decades, licensed for at least 10, practicing, correct? Is hopefully she'll fix those numbers up. But ultimately, she is coming to the table with more than just the license, but with the expertise of having lived in New York City, lived in Colorado, basically living in multiple locations and being able to focus on what we would call at-risk youth. She's an expert in the field of child counseling, has also great experience working with individuals who are in recovery, and she presents to us just a clinical career perspective on things that we probably encounter every single day, don't realize it, and what it is we can do to address it. So Danielle, as I turn it over to you, I thank you for coming in today and taking some time out of your schedule. And I ask you to really address the population that's often overlooked, right? Society's very quick to say the gang member. Society's very quick to say the derelict, the criminal, the person who doesn't count, but they forget that I've never met a drug dealer who wasn't in this to make money. So before you get mad at the person selling drugs on the corner, maybe they should knock on the neighbor's door and say you shouldn't get high anymore, and that person wouldn't be there. How can we see, identify, understand, combat, address, and identify and deal with some of the surface issues in mental health? Obviously, this is a field that is going to demand more than an hour, but at very least, if we can start the conversation and you can give us some insight on how we can move forward, that would be fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and mute my screen and my mic and my screen, see if we have any questions online, and turn it over to Danielle. At the end of her presentation, we will have a chance for questions and answers. So definitely jot those down,
Yes.
okay? All yours, Danielle.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mission. I appreciate you giving me this opportunity and the trust and belief in me and my words to share with others. So I do appreciate you thinking about me. Okay, well, this topic is kind of near and dear to my heart. So I'm just going to get right into it. So I've been a therapist for about, I guess, a little over 10 years. Officially, that is, a little over 10 years. I have had the pleasure, maybe sometimes not, of working with so many different individuals from different backgrounds, definitely at-risk youth and people struggling with substance abuse for sure. Personally and professionally, I can speak to those things as well as the topic we are going to discuss. So hang tight. Let me get it going here. Okay. Just going to jump right in. If anyone's got questions, like Mission said, just type it in. So we're here to discuss mental health and street organizations. So what's a street organization? First thing that comes to your mind is gangs, right? I'm pretty sure that's what people are thinking. So there is a difference in street organizations and gangs, and I'll leave that to Mission to touch upon maybe a little later. But just realize organizations, the word is organized. So a lot of these clubs, organizations, whatever you want to say, are organized. There is a structure, there is a hierarchy, there are roles, there are purposes. So why are they appealing? Why do people join an organization or gang, what have you? So a lot of us, I think, what I've heard anyway, professionally speaking, people are looking for something. They want to fill a void. They want family and they want to feel like they are a part of something. So why don't they already? We are talking about mostly marginalized populations. Marginalized meaning they're a second thought, they're an afterthought. They are not, that important to society, unfortunately. So a lot of this is true, right? We need a family, we need a home, we want friends, sense of community. A lot of us that didn't have that can relate. So another reason, attention. Who doesn't want attention? There are family roles, and one of them is the lost child, which means you don't get any attention, right? You're lost within the family. So this group maybe is going to give you that attention that you crave. Prestige. I don't know if people think about this as much, but sometimes when you're walking down the street and you are affiliated with a certain organization, people respect you or they fear you, both. And it feels good to walk tall, your head held high. I'm not the only one. I have, this group of brothers and sisters behind me, and I'm wanted, I'm worthy, I mean something. Protection. So I hear this a lot. A lot of people will join an organization when they're incarcerated. A lot of times it's almost forced. What do you do? Who do you spend your time with? Who's going to watch your back? Whose back are you watching? So we tend to gravitate towards, quote unquote, our own. escaping from the current situation. A lot of people that are in these organizations, not all, but I'd say a lot from what I've seen, are coming from traumatic backgrounds. Something is happening at home, things are not good. I have seen people come from very, well-to-do backgrounds that ends up in an organization that maybe is not reflective of their upbringing. So why is that? Clearly something is lacking in their life as well. So how do we get to being in a gang? How do we follow someone? What is the appeal? Who grabs us? Who grabs our attention? Who pulls us in? A lot of people use the word narcissist, and we think we know what that means. The basics, I think people do know. They're better than everyone. They want to control. They like their power. True. And we may all know someone or some people in our lives that kind of fit that. But do you know why narcissism is, why it comes to be? So we have these people that think they're special, think they're unique. Sometimes they just want to believe that, and they really don't. I don't think people see that. They think narcissists absolutely believe 100% that they are. But in my experience, I would say there's another side to that coin, right? So they fantasize unlimited power, and they want the praise. They expect praise. I like to expect is a good word. So how do they get you? How do they pull you in? What's the appeal? Well, they're arrogant. Do I want to be around someone who's arrogant? Maybe not. But hey, they have confidence. Maybe I want a little bit of that. Maybe I can learn from that. Guilt, shame. Okay, you have no one. You were treated like crap. You are crap, or whatever's been happening in your life. So I'm going to shame you into thinking you need me. You need this organization. Bullying. Okay, do I really need you? Maybe now I'm second guessing myself. Maybe I do. So how do you become a narcissist? People are not born with these tendencies, in my experience. So we have two types. Grandiose. Grandiosity, they are bigger than life. No one can stop them. They are on top of the world. They need that praise. They actually believe they are that person. So we can see most likely these people were treated as if they were superior in their childhood. So we see parents telling their kids, you're the best, no one can beat you, you're great. Positive, affirmation is absolutely wonderful and absolutely needed. I think it crosses a line sometimes where the child starts to think there really is no one better than me. And that's false. And we all know that. But with kids, they get confused, and this tends to last during their lifetime. So the grandiose will brag. They are very aggressive and dominant. And we've seen some of this, in the media, whatever, on TV. So we have business leaders and world leaders, doctors, actors. Those are the people in the forefront that we see, on TV or see in our daily lives. Very self-confident. They are not sensitive, so nothing can bother them, right? Things roll off their back. Okay, maybe. Next, we have the vulnerable narcissism. And this, I believe, is where we get into street organizations and those leaders. They were not treated special as children. They were not told they are the best and no one is better than them and they can accomplish everything they want to accomplish, everything they set out to. Great to hear. Not true. So usually the result of childhood neglect or abuse, okay, more sensitive. So I think, yeah, if you get treated badly, poorly, during your life and you're made to feel less than, you're going to be sensitive. They do feel inadequate, which we can see a lot. I'm sure people know someone or something right in their direct lives, maybe their immediate lives, that is this person. So I think it's important we take the time to kind of distinguish between the two forms of narcissism to try to understand people. So we are talking about street organizations, right? How do I command an audience? How do I get 40, 50, 100 people behind me? How do I get them to buy into what I'm saying? It takes a lot to command that kind of audience. And this is, how do I want to say it? You're not born with this. It's not innate. You do learn it, But more so than learning, I think there is a part that it's survival. Basically, you need this to survive. Okay, so here we have leader and follower of the group. So we have the leader. We know maybe that person's a narcissist, right? More times than not. That is the mirror-hungry narcissist. So they seek admiration. They want the accolades. They want everyone to praise them and think they're wonderful. Well, then we have the followers, the ideal hungry. So if someone is very cocky and, boasting, why would I want to follow them? Well, I think I want some of that confidence. I like what they have and I want to be more like them. So they feed into that mirror hungry person, right? Mirror hungry needs those accolades. So ideal hungry, feeding into that. Mirror hungry, it's the same way, right? It's a symbiotic relationship. I need to see your confidence because I want to be part of that. So I'm going to praise you. On the other side, I need that praise. So I keep doing what I'm doing and control you, basically, right? Narcissists want to control you. So imagine having 100 people behind you that you can control. You make a phone call and you tell someone, go do something. Whatever it is, it doesn't necessarily have to be something negative. Go bring grandma some flowers because she's sick. That's still something that you are requesting, commanding of people. And if they follow you, I would think that's a great feeling. Okay, look around in your life, in your family, your friends, your coworkers. Anything sound familiar so far? I can say yes. In my experience with people I've worked with, people I've surrounded myself with. So who do you know that the attention is all about them? They need that spotlight constantly. There is no room for you to discuss your accomplishments maybe, or to just feel good about yourself. It's all about them. You don't seem to matter. Okay. Take a second and think about that. Who makes you feel that way? If someone's making you feel that way, then you need to stop. Maybe not even that they're a narcissist. This is an abusive relationship. This is a sign of abuse. People don't realize that. Oh, he's a jerk. She's a jerk. Whatever. Okay, maybe. But it's abuse. There's verbal abuse. There is emotional abuse. So if someone is emotionally abusing you, they're using your feelings against you. So if you're sensitive, why are you weak? That's emotional abuse. If you make me feel weak because I'm being sensitive, emotional abuse. Why didn't that upset him? That's a sign of narcissism. Something happens that's upsetting to us all, but not that person. I have to think why. And I say he and him a lot because statistics show that most narcissists are men. Most abuse is at the hands of men, usually man on woman crime is how domestic violence goes, like 98% of the time or something like that. So why didn't that upset him? Kind of gives me a uneasy feeling in my stomach. If I think something is so upsetting and you don't at all, I have to question that. So I was important yesterday, but not today. Does that happen to you? Think about it. One day someone is idolizing you, the next way you have absolutely no value to you at all. Cannot feel good. So I didn't do anything. What's his problem? What's her problem? Why me? Why are they singling me out? Probably not even singling you out. This is what they do to everybody. Okay, so we have the ACE test, adverse childhood experiences. So I think this plays into a lot as to why people will join an organization or gang. The ACE test tells us, right, the rougher your childhood is, the more likely you are to develop chronic disease, stress, heart attacks. What we see in my field is definitely mental health illness, is at a rise. The higher you are on the ACE score, the more likely you are to have some mental health problems. It makes sense to me. So I'll see if I can pull this up. I'm not sure, to show you really quick. It's not a long test. Oh, maybe I can't pull this up. Maybe. Okay. Mission, can you see that? Here we go. Okay, so the quiz, it's 10 questions, fairly easy. Although it's sometimes hard for people to answer because they don't want to deal with it. They don't remember. It's too much.
We don't see the quiz, but
Okay.
it's not on your screen.
Okay, so let me go back. I'm just going to read some of the questions then. Okay, so did a parent or other adults in your household often or very often swear at you, insult you, humiliate you? Yes or no? These are yes or no questions. Go down a little bit. Did you often feel or very often feel no one in your family loved you? Were your family members supportive of each other, or were you an island by yourself? No one really looked out for each other. Were your parents divorced, separated? Are you from a single parent home? Were parents or any family members, on drugs? A lot of those things play into it. So we know if you've had all those things happen, imagine how are you feeling as an adult if you grew up with that? And I know people that will score 10 out of 10 and are still standing or are healthy, productive members of society. So it's not like a death sentence. You're not necessarily going to crash and burn in life, but it all depends on what kind of help you get. How do you heal? Another mental illness that we see a lot that is, people don't discuss these things. There's a stigma in different communities. There's definitely a stigma, and within organizations like this, absolutely. You don't want anyone to know your personal business because someone can use this against you. So do you want to know I'm worried or I'm sad or maybe I'm hearing voices, like Mission said? You don't really want to tell people that. So we hear bipolar a lot, right? Everyone, oh, he's bipolar, my daughter's bipolar. And, let's look at really what bipolar is. So severe high and low moods. So you're really super depressed one day, maybe you come out of it, and then bam, you hit some high that you're elated. I can describe it as if anyone's ever gotten high on some kind of stimulant, you are on top of the world. And then you crash, then you hit that low, and it's instant a lot of times. So imagine going from a complete high to a complete low. How do you even process that? How does your brain function? How do you know what to do? So mania, we hear that a lot, right? Depression is bipolar is depression and mania. What's mania? What does it mean to be manic? Super happy for a long period of time, elated, you're on top of the world, nothing can stop you. You don't need to sleep as much. I have been known to talk really fast. It's just, I guess, the Brooklyn in me. It's what I'm used to, even though I've been in Colorado for, 17 years, I guess. Impulsive. Bipolar disorder, a lot of impulsivity comes into play because if you are on top of the world, what kind of snap decisions are you making? And I don't think people realize often addicts are misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder because a lot of the symptoms overlap, impulsivity, restlessness, no need for sleep or decreased need for sleep. It's the same in both situations, bipolar or addiction. You can be diagnosed with both. I've done that. You are easily distracted. So some people think attention deficit is kind of a piece of it. I'd say I can, relate those two. Distracted. I know there's some people watching now that struggle with this. How do you complete a task? How do you work? How do you do chores around your home, chores outside the house? If you're easily distracted, it takes longer and it can be stressful. Absolutely. Overly confident. Again, you're on top of the world. Anyone know what this feels like? I might. Borderline personality disorder. I don't think many people know about this or they've seen it and don't realize it. What I have found in my profession is people that come in with these tendencies and these symptoms, they already know. And I hear a lot of times, am I borderline? Am I borderline? Am I borderline? And it's such a stigma and people kind of freak out. They do not want that diagnosis. It's a label. None of these diagnoses are life sentences. You are not your diagnosis. These are symptoms that are occurring in your life. So I don't treat bipolar or borderline narcissism, I treat the symptoms. We're going to look at what's happening in your life, how it's affecting your life, how it's affecting others around you. Is it affecting your quality of life? And that's what we look for. So borderline personality disorder, intense fear of abandonment. So that directly plays into street organizations, right? If you haven't had a good home life, if you don't feel stable, if no one's been there for you, you haven't had that rock, someone you can depend on, someone you can confide in, well, no one stays. And I hear that all the time. Why should I trust? No one stays. If that's our experience, and that's what we're going to believe. So here's an intense fear of that, right? Don't want to be alone. Everyone leaves, but please don't leave me. I think that's actually the title of a book. I Hate You, Don't Leave Me, or something like that, about borderline personality disorder. Read a long time ago. Inappropriate anger. A lot of us have that. A lot of us see it in other people. Impulsiveness, again. So let's say borderline personality disorder. Very much a victim mentality, right? Because this stems from severe abuse. So I'm the victim. I have been the victim. Now I'm going to look to other people so I don't have to be the victim. However, that's kind of turns without people realizing it. And if you're in some kind of gang, you are the victim because someone is controlling you. You may be doing things you never thought you would do. Or maybe you're doing things that are just so wonderful you didn't know you were able to do. It goes both ways. We talk about street organizations and there's such a negative connotation, right? But not always. I know a lot of people in some organizations that are wonderful people doing wonderful things for their community, for their families, for themselves. They're contributing to society in a way other people are not. Okay, so frequent mood swings. Well, has anyone ever had a mood swing? I'm not going to say anything, but with borderline personality disorder, they're very severe. I love you, I hate you. You know, everything is great, everything sucks. It's very extreme black and white thinking. So we're going to push others away, even though you don't want them to leave. I hate you, don't leave. It does cause problems in functioning. You don't really have close ties, friends. I hear a lot, people don't want me around. They don't want me to be around, or I'm such a drag. I hear that all the time, especially from older women, because borderline I see more so in women, whereas narcissism more so in men. Okay, so self-image. If I've been severely abused in my life, I'm going to have some self-image issues, obviously, because what about me made someone or some people abuse me? Post-traumatic stress. And we hear this all the time, right? On TV or wherever. I have PTSD. What is it though? No one really knows what it is. So I work a lot with veterans that have come back from combat. I see this a lot with them. Children that have been abused, domestic violence survivors and offenders. I was lucky enough to create a domestic violence program at one of my former jobs in Wyoming. Wonderful experience. And I have to say, some of those men, because it's mostly men, right, perpetrators of domestic violence, they were all on federal probation. So they would come out and they would have to see me for a domestic violence evaluation to see, where are you at now? Maybe you went to jail for that, maybe not. Definitely some anger issues, and 95% of the men, I guess, that I've seen. Okay, so where did that come from? Do they even know why they are abusers? Why are they violent? And I love working with people and the light bulb goes off. One of the best times was a man said to me, oh, you know what? Now that we're talking, my father abused my mom. She couldn't leave the house and she didn't have money of her own. So domestic violence includes a lot of things, not just physical violence. That's what we think, right? If someone's got a black eye, he or she's being abused. There's verbal abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. There's also financial abuse. If you don't have control of funds and you don't have access to maybe leaving the home or buying groceries on your own, that is abuse. That is control. Spiritual abuse. If I force you to go to church, if I tell you if you don't do this, you may go to hell, what have you. I've kind of seen a lot of it. So a lot of people that are in street organizations, I can say, have some kind of trauma. Not everyone. Recently, I worked with a man who was from California, very open and honest with me and his background. Very violent offender. He was just released after 10 years in prison. And, he's in an organization. He's been in this organization since he's about, I think, 14 or 15 years old. That's all he's known, and that's his family. Well, now he's here in Colorado. I don't want that anymore. I'm 52 years old. What do I do? How do I retire? How do I get out? Where is my identity? And I hear that so much. I don't know who I am anymore. Okay, so I think it's important to realize that people in gangs, who are they? You lose your identity. You are now that entity, good or bad. Sometimes that starts out good for you and then ends up not so good, or vice versa, or you just run the gamut sometimes, right? Post-traumatic stress. We know trauma, different kinds of trauma, abuse, combat. We see, especially I can say in, I guess in some members that I've personally known, in some kind of organization, angry outbursts. Why? What's happening in your life that you are so angry? What did I do? What did that person do? What is happening around you? Sometimes there is no trigger. We don't even know what's happening. And I think that's what scares people a lot. I don't know why I'm doing what I do. So we have other symptoms, flashbacks and nightmares, trouble sleeping. So I can personally say with the people that I've known, trouble sleeping, nightmares. Now, trouble sleeping. How do you sleep well if you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow? If you're living a street life. People don't even see this, with mental health being such a stigma to it. I don't think people view other people in these organizations as human beings. We all come from backgrounds. I'm not better than you, vice versa. So if I'm having trouble sleeping and I'm pacing the streets 3 o'clock in the morning, am I crazy? A lot of people think that. If I am talking to myself, right? Maybe I'm calming myself down. Maybe I'm experiencing some psychosis. I'm hearing voices. Maybe I'm talking to the Holy Spirit. I don't know, but I'm not going to judge. That's not my job. But we just need to be aware of these things because all of these issues form who we are. Very easily to be, it's very easy to be seduced into some kind of organization, or it's very romanticized. Well, why is that? Why do we believe that? Well, all these things have happened in my life. I need something to look up to. That seems very positive to me. That seems very loving to me. Whether or not that's your reality is a different story. So trouble concentrating, you feel like you're alone, shame, embarrassment, blaming yourself. So I see shame being a big part of street organizations. With some members, they are ashamed of their family, what they've done in the past, maybe some abuse or substance abuse. A lot of mental illness is intertwined with substance abuse. People want to self-medicate. If I'm not feeling good, or I don't know how to handle my depression, my anger, my anxiety, whatever, how do I get away from that? How do I numb that? You can go to a psychiatrist, you can go to your primary care provider, they can write you a prescription. Absolutely. That happens a lot. Or I can take it upon myself to go self-medicate, because this way no one knows, what's going on. I don't have to tell anyone my story. I'm going to numb myself the same way. And a lot of prescriptions, same effect as street drugs, unfortunately. So I like this statement a lot. Violent men and gang members have higher prevalence of mental disorders and use of psychiatric services than nonviolent men, but a lower prevalence of depression. So we're more violent, but less depressed. I have to think about that. Why is that? So with women in these organizations, we see more depression, more of a subservient role that they take on, more emotional abuse, meant to be more aggressive, so maybe physical and verbal. Women tend to be emotionally sly sometimes, and that goes unnoticed. That's a whole other issue. Women in street organizations. Why? What do people think of them? Do we think of them different from the men that we see, running in this circle? Are they less than? You have kids. Why are you running the streets? Well, maybe she's, I don't know, fighting oppression. This is kind of my thing. I feel like I fight oppression. I promote social justice. So this world of being involved in a community was appealing to me when I was younger. And some of us can, learn some things about ourselves and our community and really turn that into something positive. If you have the right foundation, the right tools, the right support, and a lot of people in these gangs do not. So here is just some contact information if anyone needs. So NAMI, it's the #1 go-to, National Alliance of Mental Illness. Every kind of resource you can imagine is there on their website. They're available to speak to you 24 hours a day. I like the next one. I give this out a lot, especially to teenagers, because you can text it. Sometimes we don't want to talk to people. So I have a man that I worked with maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And I knew him from Brooklyn. And this is the story. I'll give you a little background. So he was in a very well-known organization. And I would park my car, when I come home from work, a few buildings down from where he would be. And he would be outside on his stoop with all his friends and all the other members and just kind of, hanging out, but keeping an eye on things, maybe bothering some people as they walked by if they didn't like you or if they didn't know you. And that's a really big thing. If you're not known, you're a stranger, why are you here? And so my cousin and a few people, we have to walk by this building, and they had just moved in. Everyone, they said something to me, or, what's the problem? I have beef with this person now, right? I don't like them. We're going to go to war. And I walked by and nothing. Walked by again the next day, nothing. My friend said, why aren't they saying anything to you? Well, I didn't know. So I wound up speaking to somebody, and I didn't realize that he actually was the leader of this organization. And I asked him, why me? You don't bother me. I walk with my kids. I come from work. And he said, you remind me of a counselor I had in juvenile detention when I was 13. She's the only person that listened to me. Okay, great. So from then on, he said, well, you can walk down the street with no problem. You're protected. So there you go. There's the prestige. He felt good about himself. He had that kind of power, that kind of control over others, and made me feel safe. To be honest, I can do whatever I want. We didn't live in the best neighborhood. So if anyone wants to look up Hunts Point in the Bronx, it's not a very nice place to live. But I got to know him. Over the years, I really got to know him. And what happened with him, a lot of substance abuse. He had a lot of trauma that had happened to him as a kid, and he ended up in juvenile detention, and then he went to jail, and then he went to prison, and he did about 5 or 6 years. I don't remember how long in prison. So now he comes out. He had joined this organization when he was in jail. He comes out. Now he's got his own little following, on the block. He grows that. There was 5 people, 10 people, 20 people. And now my whole neighborhood is pretty much a part of this, and getting to know him and finding out his background. He wouldn't tell anybody this, and I don't blame him, right? It's his personal information. Well, it got to be too much for him. And he started doing some really hard drugs. And he started seeing things. He started acting out of character. He was very aggressive towards people that he had shown love to. So what happens to him? Is he embraced? Do people want to know what's happening? Brother, let me help you. No, he's kind of outed, made fun of. And unfortunately, the last I heard about a year ago was, I think he was homeless and didn't have any family, kind of on his own. And that was his cycle. That's how he started life. And that's where he is now. as far as I know. So let me get out of here.
You muted yourself, Danielle. While Danielle is coming back, there she is. Did she come back? She came back. Well, first of all, while she's wrapping up the presentation and before she comes back on full-fledged, let me thank her again for that information. Let me thank you all again for participating. One of the things, a couple of points that I want to just reiterate, as she had stated, oh wait, I think she's having some tech issues. One of the things is we want to make sure it's clear that we're not equating gang membership with mental illness, not by a long shot. The two are not necessarily synonymous with each other. However, gang membership and mental health are often a conversation that are not had in the same room. So we want everybody to understand that, again, gang membership does not equate to mental illness. We have to be careful with how we present this information and how we function in our day-to-day lives because of the fact that we can contribute consciously or not to the stigma and the stereotypes. We need to not only interact with one another with an open mind, but with open eyes as well. Understanding that there are a lot of individuals who are leaders of gangs or street organizations who are not representative of any of the slides presented here today, and who are actually trying to make a difference within their organizations. I, for one, am a member of the Almighty Latin King and Queen Nation and have been for the last 25 years. This particular conversation, this particular topic is one that I think members of my organization and any organization, be it street, be it boardroom, narcissism is not solely existing in the street, right? It's not like we've never been in a meeting with an employer who's not narcissistic. If you look at the stereotypical presentation of what a broker would be, or a Wall Street worker, or if you watch those movies that show the brokers in Wall Street and how they interact with one another, we're going to see all of these slides come to life. So I want to make sure that we're clear that we're not saying gang members are all suffering from some form of mental illness. Now, one of the slides that, one of the points that Danielle made that really interested me the most was when she was talking about the different levels of abuse and how different areas and different interactions can constitute a form of abuse that we may not have seen. And I challenge everyone on the call, on the video, to think about how society and the government in general are abusing us as a whole. Mental health resources, despite the fact that there's a number you can text, despite the fact that there's a place you can call, despite the fact that there's 24-hour intake centers, to get a counseling appointment is at times an act of Congress for a lot of people, depending on the insurance that they have, right? Can they afford a copay? Will their insurance cover it? Can they afford the meds if they had the appointment? And so to me, in my perspective, that is a form of abuse that we as everyday individuals are having to endure. How many times have I heard someone say, you know what, I needed a counselor, I really wanted to speak to somebody, I was really going through a lot. I called and they told me they can get me in 3 weeks. I cannot imagine making it till tomorrow. How can I be ready for an appointment in 3 weeks? So that in itself is a form of abuse in my eyes. I'd like to pose a question to both Danielle and to everyone in the group. You know, I'd like to ask, do you all feel that there is a possibility for the negative traits of mental illness that have been shared with today to be incorporated into one's psyche or into one's repertoire for the I guess the basis of a trend, if you will? Is it possible for there to be a trend of exhibiting narcissistic tendencies, bipolar tendencies, depressed tendencies? I remember growing up, kids would just get beat up, right? It was some shit that happened. Some kids went to school and got beat up. Some kids went to school and did the beating up. But you weren't really getting bullied. You just probably got beat up. That was it. Somewhere in the last 20-something years, bullying became a thing, and then now everybody's getting bullied. Somewhere in the last 10 years, in the work that I've been doing with at-risk youth, I have seen a huge uptake in individuals claiming to be depressed. These are individuals who have not been diagnosed professionally. They're just grabbing onto the term. They do not understand the difference between I am depressed and I am suffering from depression. And they do not understand how those two things are different. So do you all feel it is possible for there to be a trend of mental illness traits being exhibited? That's question one. And question two, we heard a lot of the terms that Danielle shared with us on her slides over the last 4 years under big quotations, former President Trump. Do we see, because the media and so many avenues of information presented those terms to us as a result of his presidency or lack thereof, do we see that as a possibility for that trend mentality that I talked about earlier, that I just asked you about? Do we see that as a stage setter for people to act out these traits? And if so, how do we combat that? Those are my questions. First to you, Danielle, and then anybody else who wants to chime in. I know we've got some other professionals here. Feel free to do so.
Okay, well, sorry I got disconnected for a second. You make a lot of valid points. First, I just want to say, of course, mental illness is not rampant, in organizations. So I think that's important to notice. So the trends, nowadays I kind of see the trends with, teens, especially girls. They are cutting. Why is this a thing? This wasn't a thing when I was growing up. That I know of, right? I never heard of anything like that. But now everyone is depressed and everyone is getting bullied. And a lot of people are cutting or turning to some form of self-harm. Well, social media, absolutely. Is it a trend? Is it society? Is it situational? All of the above, maybe. Kids don't have the support like they did. Nowadays, more so, a lot of single parent homes. And kids are not getting the attention they need, the love that they need. And everyone's given a trophy for participating, which I don't agree with, because that's not real life. I think that sets us up for failure. So trends, I definitely see that with kids more so than adults. And there is a difference between struggling with depression and being depressed. If you're depressed, maybe shit is not going your way, right? And it's sad or it's stressful and maybe life sucks right now. Okay, I'm depressed. I'm overwhelmed. Struggling with depression is very different. This affects every aspect of your life and has been for X amount of time. Now, we have to realize mental illness is not always situational. It is, sometimes it's a chemical imbalance. We have to realize these different nuances. So thank you for clarifying that. I will pass the baton. Yeah.
Marcia has a question. She says, is it a trend or is there a greater awareness and thus more people putting the label on it? Thoughts on that?
I think definitely there is more awareness, but there's more pressure. How do we fit in? I mean, we're talking about, like organizations that you fit in. Well, culture of depression is a way of fitting in. If all my friends are dealing with this, then me too. I don't feel good too. And I think that's just a domino effect that's happening today with what I see with the kids that I work with. I think that's a great question.
Thank you. And somebody's chopping in. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm not a professional, but I liked that question. Awareness, it makes sense, that could be part of it too. For instance, I know someone whose grandfather was in World War II. He was a delightful man, but he came back drinking and with shell shock. And no, they didn't know it was PTSD. He just changed after the war, and there was no diagnosis for that. So I think probably, yeah, it's a little bit of both.
Thank you. Absolutely. David writes, trauma can manifest itself in many ways, including symptoms of other disorders. If it's thought that the majority of street organization members suffer trauma, then that could be the trend. The thread and the common occurrence. That's a very interesting point because it causes us to look beyond the scope of clinical terms, clinical diagnoses, and really look at society as a whole. I would challenge that statement and say the threat is not the trauma that we've suffered, but the trauma we continue to suffer as people of color, as oppressed communities, as marginalized communities, as socioeconomically depressed individuals and areas, and how that colonizer and colonized mentality comes into effect. That is an ongoing trauma. We can't necessarily repair, recoup, and recover from something that is still going on. I can recover Tuesday for what started and ended on Monday, but I can't recover Tuesday from something that is always going on. You know, I can think of the rite of passage in this country of getting your driver's license, right? How many of us who have children who stop and say, you know what, the act of getting that learner's permit, the act of getting that driver's license, how it's a rite of passage. As a person of color, I need to understand that I don't have just one driver's license in my car. I have three, strategically positioned because I'm the wrong color to reach for the license in the glove box. So I've got to have one on me in the glove box. I've got to have one on the little pocket that's underneath the steering wheel. Anything I can do to not reach. And then I've got to teach my kid what a traffic stop is as a life or death situation. That is something that street organizations deal with regularly. I think to the Puerto Rican Day Parade in New York City. For those of you who are not familiar with that parade, it is actually the largest parade that New York City has. And the history of the parade for Puerto Ricans is rooted in what is called La Ley de la Mordaza. It was a gag order, if you will, that was implemented in the 50s in Puerto Rico, where it was made illegal for Puerto Ricans to have a Puerto Rican flag on the island. I mean, you got to really let that soak in, right? Puerto Ricans were told by the United States of America, you could not have a Puerto Rican flag. And if you did, you were arrested. It was a felony, and there were raids, and it was a whole big to-do. Anyway, so the parade comes about in this country, and it symbolizes an opportunity for Puerto Ricans to wave their flag and really be proud of who they are. You have all these organizations that want to showboat in a capitalist society where branding is a thing. Every organization is making sure that you are not looking in any direction without seeing their name, their symbol, their colors, something. Gang shows up, and right away, so do the police. But a fraternity, a sorority can come from a college with a windbreaker, beads, batons, paddles. I mean, I give you the fraternity that has a cane and says the cane is part of our colors and it's just a cane, we use it to walk. But what the hell are the paddles for, right? Paddles are used for one thing and one thing only. So you have these people coming in and there are absolutely no issues. Now, anybody can say, well, these are collegiate organizations. They don't have the criminal history that gangs do, but that would be clearly someone who's not versed on the history of fraternities and sororities because they have just as much a criminal history as gangs do. And yet there is this stigma between the two different organizations. And so we look at, again, terms of trauma. How do we address a community who is living in trauma? How do we tell someone these are the coping mechanisms to deal with the trauma of your past when that trauma has not yet passed? So that's something I'd like Danielle to speak to. And then we have another comment here. It says, I'm curious if there could possibly be a link between codependency and organization dynamics. I can tell you from my experience, 150%. That is definitely, I see that all the time, individuals who give themselves to the organization because they don't have anything else that they feel they can give themselves to, and they need that reaffirmation of who they are. I'm sure Danielle can speak more to that in her profession. But again, going back, including that comment, and then also going back to how do we address the ongoing trauma? How do we understand the cultural ramifications of what is the counseling community? You know, Danielle, when you received your credentials, You took examinations, you got your degree, you had to sit for the
Mhm.
licensing board. I'm pretty
Right.
sure that was not as culturally sensitive and diverse as the country that you're now practicing in. How do you get
Yes.
around that?
Okay, so a couple things. So a lot of times what I have to tell these kids that come see me, they're still living in it, right? Like you're saying, a whole community is living with this trauma and this abuse and this oppression. So the same thing I tell every kid is, all right, we're going to teach you how to function in a dysfunctional world. And that's the hardest thing. It's hard enough to heal and make changes when you're in a positive, surrounding and you have all the love and support that you need. Same thing with community. How do you heal from this? How do you grow? How do you not um I don't know what I'm trying to say exactly, like just continue the same um path that people expect from you. Continue with that anger because you're being oppressed. How do children deal with parents that are still abusing them? I can't teach you to not be abused. I can't teach your parents maybe not to abuse you. I cannot teach society to recognize individuals and cultures. It's not my job and it's impossible. So we have to learn how to function. We are responsible for our own actions, right? And how we react to things. I can't change you, but I can change myself. It's a big question. It really is. And the Puerto Rico Day Parade, I mean, even if you're not Puerto Rican, everyone's celebrating that day. It's just a huge cultural thing. A lot of people absolutely fight against it. They don't want to see it at all. In New York City, especially, the Puerto Rican culture is huge, and yet not really paid attention to, not really respected unless you were actually in that culture yourself. Um, Kind of went off on a tangent. So what else?
No, you're good. You're good. David writes, you're right. Trauma can't be healed in the environment it was created. It seems to make sense that the community must then change and become a healing environment. And I like that statement. But what stands out to me most is the detachment of how we reference the community. It's never referenced as, or not never, but it's rarely referenced as, how do we collectively become the healing environment? I mean, there are individuals on this call whom I've never had the opportunity to meet, but for this hour and a half, we are indicative of an online community. We may not have any other connection except this interaction and this conversation, but how are we always detaching this concept of community? Just like we'll say the gangs and we'll talk about street organizations. And I think about company picnics, right? Everybody's got, well, back in the day when companies had picnics, I mean, COVID done changed the whole shit. COVID done changed everything. But when you had the family reunions, when you had the company picnics, when you had the days of service, when you had the school trips and everybody had the same t-shirt on and everybody was the pepitos and everybody looked the same, that was a gang for the sake of that day. Yet when we talk about the one kid on the train that has some beads on his neck, that has a patch on his shirt, that has a flag coming out of his pocket, he's looked at as a representative of a criminal organization that's not on the train, mind you. What is on the train are these Wall Street brokers who are a gang in their own, right? You look at anybody who saw the movie The Joker, there's a great scene where the Joker's on the train and there's the three young brokers assaulting a woman. They then go on to assault the Joker, who shoots them. But before they got shot, they were the gang on that train. So when we talk about community, I think it's really important that we understand anytime we are interacting, we are the only animal that really thinks we can separate itself from within the species, right? I don't really think lions walk around the jungle and are like, that dude's mane really ain't as full as mine. We're not the same kind of lion. So I really think that as humans, we have a tendency to separate ourselves and make this us versus them mentality. And as long as we do that, we can never change and create an environment of healing. We're always going to create an environment of, I'm healing you or I'm helping you, but that is not really respecting where I'm coming from. And I personally believe even the person with the greatest amount of trauma and the least amount of clinical expertise and the least amount of formalized education is still a professor, PhD level on what they went through, more than anybody else could ever be. Your turn, Danielle.
Okay, you know, what you said about, you know, us versus them. That's the world we live in. Unfortunately, there aren't many people that even want to bridge that kind of gap. So, you know, I'm proud that I think I'm one of those people that doesn't, you know, separate, you know, all different people and cultures and what have you. And I don't sit in session and I'm better than you and I have all this formal education, so you need to listen to me. Absolutely not. My job is to reflect back, you know, to offer my opinions, what I see. But who does that? Like, let's be honest. This is not the culture that we live in. It is all about me. I'm number one. I have to take care of me and my family and everyone else, whatever. That's second, even if I even care about you. You know, so there are people like myself, people like you, Mission. You're a great role model for people, especially that we grew up with. You know, people will look at you. I know people that look at you like, oh, that brother made it out. How did he do it? Well, you can do it too. But they don't believe that. Why? Because they fall into that role. I can't. No one believes it. You were lucky enough to have, you know, a great upbringing as far as, you know, being taught the right way, I guess, quote unquote, the right way. So yeah, I just don't think that is our culture, unfortunately, to include everyone. It's just not how we roll.
How do you all see, we there was a comment earlier about a greater level of awareness. How is that affecting the cultural rites of passage of adolescence? How is that adding more sh- drama, stress, what have you, to the adolescent mindset in general, right? Because I look at the way these young people are navigating their lives now, and I really do not understand how these adolescents are living because I come from the generation of the look, and I'm not going to date myself, but there was this like ninja level look that my mother had that she could give it from across the room. And I was like, damn, I'm gonna get my ass beat at some point today. And then my mother suffered from like short-term memory loss. So I would get home, wouldn't get my ass beat, thought I was in the clear. And then like a week later, I'm watching cartoons and I got an ass whooping because my mother finally remembered the hell she was gonna beat my ass about the week before. But I look at these kids now and I'm looking at the 10-year-olds with the iPhones. I'm looking at the preteens watching the Twilight movie and seeing the girl not get the guy. And then it's okay for her to sit depressed in her room. I mean, the scene literally has the months go by, January, February, March, and they're internalizing this acceptance of what I would see as a cry for help. I look at social media and people are like, I hate my life. I'm going to kill myself. Like. Well, what the hell are you liking? Are you liking that I'm going to kill myself? I mean, what's really going on here? So how do you think this awareness is it awareness or is it exposure? I mean, we really got to really draw that line because if we're making people aware, in my mind, that comes with a certain level of consciousness and understanding. If we're just exposing them, then what?
Hey, Mission. It's Jessica. So, based on what you've been saying, I've been having these conversations with my mother and also with my sister because I have a younger cousin. She's about 13 and she has Instagram. And, granted, we did not have all of these. I didn't have any social media platform when I was 13. If I wanted to talk to someone, I had to pick up the phone. I had to, go outside and meet with my friends or talk to them at school. But she's been posting like these very sexually suggestive pictures at 13. And I've noticed that a lot of her friends are also doing it. And she's been like on social media, like I would say it's like some sort of addiction since she was younger. Her parents got her an iPhone when she was in elementary school. So I think that that's part of the problem is that parents are using these forms of technology as like a babysitter. They're not really engaging with their children. They don't really know what's going on, and they're also not monitoring the technology that they're using. So it's like they have access to so many different things that I think are inappropriate for children at their age. And, you know, all of their friends are doing it. So it's just there. I don't really think it's an awareness. I just think it's that they're overexposed because the parents are not really involved. So these are conversations that I'm going to have with my cousin, her mother, because it's something that's bothering me. Then I'm thinking, you know, what if there's like a pedophile posing as a child that is like watching her page and, you know, trying to get her to meet them somewhere. It's just so many things that run through my mind. And it's just that I really can't relate to it. And I'm also concerned for her safety. So it's this generation is it's really hard for me to understand. I used to laugh at my mother's generation because they would always say, you know, your generation is crazy. And I'm just thinking, I hope when I get older, I'm not that person, but I am turning into that person because it's just like something that I cannot relate to and I can't understand.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. I agree with you. I think that there is a heightened level of exposure. And it's amazing how technology seems to know that the parent is going to use them for the wrong reason, right? You don't just have the iPhone for the 8-year-old. The iPhone is made with applications to safeguard the child, because the parent's not doing the job. How to find your kid, how to track your kid, how to track the amount of time that the kid is on the phone. How about you just keep track of that? I was recently in Chicago doing some research, and I had this rental car, and I go to park the car, and this big light comes on the dashboard, and my first thought is like, shit, I just bought this rental car. You know what I mean? I can't even afford the gas, and here I just bought this car. And it was a notification to let me know, to remind me to check the back seat for my kid. I had to really sit down and just marvel at the fact that we are now having automobiles remind parents that they have children and that they need to check them and make sure they're not leaving them in the car. To me, that's indicative of other social ails and social problems. So I don't know. Anybody else want to make any comments about anything that's going on so far that we've mentioned? Feel free to just chime in. Oh, we got a comment while whoever's going to chime in chimes in. It says from David, the system as a whole affects the community. Factors such as generational poverty, racism, and media coverage hinder a community from healing or creating healing environments. Awareness would be most beneficial if it leads to action. I agree. Any other comments, any other questions, anything somebody else want to add? Right, let's see here. So Danielle, we've done a great job identifying some of these great traits, right? Some of these great flags, if you will. What does the average person do next? So now we're talking about street organizations. I'm in a gang. I sit down and I realize that my leader is a narcissist. But then I go get a job and everybody's telling me, oh, you know what, you're in a gang and you need to get out that gang and your leader's a narcissist and blah, 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 blah. But then I go get that job and my boss is a narcissist. Then I go to church and I start to realize that, you know what, the priest has some narcissistic tendencies. Then what? How do I protect myself? How do I engage in an activity that really supports my mental health? It's very poetic for us to say things like, how do we function in a dysfunctional world? But
Mhm.
after that poem is ended, how do we function in a dysfunctional world? How do we not become numb to violence? Now, we're not in Gaza right now where the Palestine people are being abused and bombed. That's not the world we're living in. We're not waking up to bombs. However, you look at Chicago, they're waking up to 40, 50 people shot every weekend, 10, 20 people shot during the week. It's so normal to them that it's not even a thing. How do we combat mental health? Not mental health. How do we combat mental illness while preserving mental health in a world that really does not understand what healthy is to everybody? You mentioned earlier, somebody could be talking to themselves. Maybe they're talking to spirit. Maybe they're meditating, whatever, what have you. As a practitioner of Afro-Cuban traditions and traditional African spiritual disciplines, I can tell you the Yoruba people do not feel depression is something, or mental illness is something that can be treated with medicine or with any kind of intervention from the medical field. They feel that any form of mental illness is a direct result of a disconnect and a detachment from their ancestral energies. If someone of a Nigerian descent came and told you, hey, my parents think not my parents think that I'm having a mental breakdown, but my school counselor thinks I'm having a mental breakdown. And now CPS has been called because my parents said no, because culturally that doesn't exist for us. And we're going to be doing some ceremonies, but now child services involved. And now I got to meet with you. And now you want to prescribe me some drugs. What is the recourse? Where does that rabbit hole end? Where does the mental health field turn into the definition of all of the negative aspects you shared in your slides?
I think it is, it's the responsibility of anyone that's working with someone else, especially if you're in the medical field or mental health, any kinds of clinician. It's your responsibility to get to know people, get to know their culture, their beliefs. It's not for you to judge it. So yes, poetic, right? How do we function in a dysfunctional world? As adults, we have access to education, and I don't mean going to college. You can look something up, Google it, I'm sure there's a YouTube video on it or whatever. That is our responsibility as adults. We know what's out there, no matter how marginalized you are or how beat down you have been. I think everyone, at least here in Colorado, in my home, let me just speak to that, knows what's available, knows there's a different life. Hell, I grew up watching the Brady Bunch. Fake as fuck, right? What is that about? I live in reality. There's abuse, yes, but there are healthy relationships as well. What do I want for myself? So as a clinician, I have to help people get there. First, figure out, what do you want? What is lacking? Where are you hurting? And now let's fill in those gaps. Let's give you the resources to get what you want. Let's build you up. Whatever I need to do, that is my job. That is my responsibility. And if I fall short of that, then I have to answer, to whoever, to myself, to my boss, whatever, to the people that regulate my licenses, whatever. But that's my responsibility. But as a responsibility, I think as individuals, to also take the reins. This is your life. What do you want to do with it?
Thank you. Thank you. Now, in the interest of time, we got about one good question left, and I want to make sure that I allow everybody a chance to address this one, starting again, of course, with Danielle. There's a lot of, first of all, police brutality is unfortunately a reality in this country, right? We're seeing it in a way that I can't really say is unprecedented, because this is where technology comes in. There were people being abused all over this country all the time. We have a population of homeless individuals throughout this country who are battling police brutality and social injustice from within the community on a daily basis, but they don't have the luxury of owning a cell phone or having internet, so those videos never get posted. But I digress. The call to defund the police is a call that is associated heavily with an increase in social services and mental health services. As a professional, do you see your field in a position, and again, this is completely your opinion and anyone else who wants to share. Do you all feel that in your profession that you all are ready to step up in the capacity of what a defund the police movement would call for? Let me give you an example. In Cuba, social workers are seen as one of the most prominent, important, influential members of their community. Social workers are involved in every aspect of Cuban life, political, business, cultural, because their title is translated literally. They are social workers. They work with society in every aspect, whether they are ready or not. A building is going to be built. There is a social worker on site to address the workers and the community, to address why that building is being built, so forth and so on. Do you feel in this country that your profession is at a place where it can adequately respond to the defund the police movement?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, let's realize there's a difference between social workers and licensed professional counselors, whatever, LMFTs, right? Licensed marriage and family. So we're all lumped in together as we're all therapists. We all provide therapeutic services. I'm a social worker. That means I look at the whole person in the environment, everything that's going on in your life. So yes, I'm a therapist right now, but I can do case management. I'm an advocate. I'm an educator. I take on all these roles. So social workers, we could run the world, in my opinion, but that's not reality. As far as the police go, defunding them, realistically, I think right now, if I have to call the police on someone for a welfare check, I have to let them know. And that's what I say to them, my person is whatever, depressed, suffering with schizophrenia or what have you. He is not dangerous, but he probably is going to bug out when he sees you. Don't shoot him. I say those words. Okay. And what I also say is this call is being recorded, right? That holds them accountable. I'm not stupid. I know what's happening. I see what's happening. I will come. I've met the police at my client's house before. I have to talk them off the ledge. I got to talk, this woman into getting, into a police vehicle because that's what's best for her. Defunding the police. Are we ready for that? No, not now. Can we be? If people gave a crap, that's my honest opinion.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to chime in? Any other professionals on the line that want to chime into that comment? Please let me know. Right. And so last question, and then give you a chance to do your closing, is how can the community really engage with mental health professionals? What is needed from a communal perspective, right? Obviously, you've got the numbers. I believe May is also Mental Health Awareness Month, if I'm not mistaken. How can the community as a whole really bridge the gap between mental health professionals and the average person? What do you see there ever being? I think back to good old Reagan and his war on drugs, right? And how cities were inundated with information that fought to bridge the gap between professionals and civilian, where the civilian was versed on all of these terms. What do you think would have to happen for there to be a gap bridge between society and the professional, mental health professional?
I have to ask, what kind of buy-in is there? What is in it for me? That's the culture, we live. Am I going to take time to worry about John Doe, Joe Blow down the block? I have to worry about myself. We don't care. Bottom line, we do not care about each other the way, in my opinion, we should. How do we bridge that gap? I don't know. Maybe start not assuming things of people. People that know me from, I taught Sunday school from years. Well, they wouldn't believe that I was a homeless drug addict in New York, 20 years ago. People that knew me in New York 20 years ago wouldn't believe that I taught Sunday school for years. You look at me and you're going to think what you're going to think. So let's stop that. Let's talk about that. Like, let's be honest. Okay, I see you and I think you're a criminal or whatever. I think you act like a saint. You're whatever it is. There's no real conversation. So that's to be continued, I guess. I don't really have an answer for that. I mean, that's my opinion.
Well, no, I thank you for that. And I think that the point is to understand, you said it perfectly in not giving a final answer, because that is the answer, right? If you were to be able to say, hey, what has to happen in this community is this, the follow-up question could be, which community specifically are you talking about? How are you culturally being sensitive to the makeup? You know, are you addressing the Native American population? Are you addressing the African American population, the Latino population, so forth and so on? So I thank you for that. Anybody else want to say anything before we go?
Hey, Mission, it's Jessica. I can speak for like the African American experience. I mean, in order to really get people to like, in order to bridge the gap, I can speak for my family specifically. I'm sorry if you hear a lot of noise. I'm driving right now, but I grew up in a culture where you don't air your dirty laundry, so you don't go and you talk to strangers about the problems that you have. You can only talk to your family about it, or it was the culture of you just go pray about it. So it's just unlearning what was taught to us and unlearning that, you know, there is a problem with talking to people outside of the family, because a lot of the problems that you have mentally stem from issues with other family members. So, you know, it always felt like it was unsafe to go to the family like they would tell us to go to, because, you know, I could have been abused by a family member. I need to talk to someone about it. And you're telling me, you know, you can't air your dirty laundry, so you need to just deal with it, keep it hush hush. So it's just unlearning all of that and unlearning the cultural trauma that you have dealt with your entire life. And when you're doing that, I mean, you can, in a way, be ostracized from your family because you're looked at as the black sheep. You're going against the family and what has been taught for years. So I think that level of awareness is more commonplace now, where people are, you know, fighting back against the, I guess you could say, like, cultural norms. And they're saying that there's nothing wrong with going to a therapist or, you know, going to a counselor or anything like that. And it's actually a sign of strength and not weakness, like it's been ingrained in us for so long. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Oh, looks like Omar Torres has his hand up. Go ahead.
Mission, thank you, man. And I've been waiting to jump in for a minute to think about that, but I think Jessica hit the nail right on the head for me. That kind of hit home for me, given the context that I work in. I struggle with the unlearned part, because again, I work in an educational setting. I think about Danielle and the space that she works in mental health and supporting those in that transition. And for all of us as those who may be in a space, we don't probably talk enough. And I know I don't talk enough, or I don't even learn enough to know about how to unlearn. And I think that's a significantly powerful word to talk about today, because again, I could be encouraged to, or I could be handheld to, or literally escorted over to a mental health practitioner, to a mental health professional, and find that in a setting. But because I've been trained up to not be comfortable in that space, how then do I process being comfortable? So I think for me, the struggle for me, again, and as someone who's been in that space and encouraging and provoking that work for over 20 years, how do I myself unlearn? And then how do I teach others to unlearn?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, thank you. And on that note, I mean, I want to be respectful of everybody's time, so we got to wrap it up. But Omar, thank you. Jessica, thank you. I think those are some very good points. You know, the need to unlearn. We talk about awareness. We talk about exposure, but we haven't even yet gotten to the point where we can talk about understanding, right? We can expose someone to this information. We can help them understand that they want to be a part of this, but at the end of the day, will they understand, what cultural ramifications are there? So I think that's important. To wrap it all up, I want to thank everybody for participating, for your thoughts, for your comments. And I really challenge everyone to take the information that you've gained here today, or at least if nothing else, be mindful of the fact that this conversation is happening. This conversation is happening. It happened this evening. It's happening in smaller settings all over the world, and it's happening informally. A simple entryway of, hey, how are you feeling? What's going on? What's on your mind? To ask somebody what's on your mind is to delve into a potential world that you may or may not be qualified to address. But I want you to think about the next time you're in a public space, those weird methodical creatures, the train, conference centers, all those things that we read about before COVID. And you see these young people and you see them affiliated. Before you pass judgment on a young person, or even an adult for that matter, who is affiliated with a street organization, a gang, or anything, I want you to take a good hard look at yourself. Are you wearing a t-shirt with your alma mater on it? Do you have a pen with the name of your company on it? Does your briefcase have a stamp of your favorite organization? Or are you did you purchase that $15 Starbucks hard cup so that you can get your coffee in your own cup? And now, as a result, you're broadcasting and you're advertising. Keep in mind, to pass judgment on the affiliation of other individuals, what does that speak? What does that say to your mental aptitude, to your level of your maturity, and to your ability to really be helpful in community settings? So again, I thank all of you for participating today. I thank all of you for commenting. We will be uploading this video to YouTube for future reference. I think the biggest takeaway for me is to understand that in addressing mental health, how we remain healthy is subjective. We need to understand that there's cultural connotations, social connotations, familiar connotations, spiritual connotations, and we can't pass judgment on anybody. We cannot assume that there is a one size fits all for everyone. So again, thank you so very much. Danielle, thank you for the information. I would like, if you don't mind, before we close, if you can bring up your presentation one more time, just to the last slide, should anybody need those numbers or know anyone
Absolutely.
who would benefit from those numbers, if you can put that up there.
You got it.
Look at you with the share screen button right away.
Did you like that? You taught me a lot.
That was the 20 minutes before we started that you were on. I got you. I got you.
You saved me again, brother. I appreciate it.
I was going through mental illness trying to get you to get this screen share. So
Very nice.
let's go down.
Okay.
Here. I think, there we go.
All right. Let's
I think
see.
it was the last one, right?
There we go.
So yeah, this is again great information. It is Mental Health Awareness Month. I believe the Universal Mental Health Awareness accepted color, if I'm not mistaken, is green, but I could be wrong. But I challenge everybody to find out what's going on in your area regarding mental health awareness. How can you help somebody? How can you be helped yourself? Do you need help? I mean, whatever the case is, let's all just understand that this is something that we're all dealing with in one way, shape, or form. So again, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Much appreciated. And in the interest of respecting everyone's time and ending on time, I'd like to thank you all again. You have a great night. Take care.
Thanks, Mission. Be well.
All right. You are.